Greetings and welcome back to Switch to Linux with another supporter stream. And we are joined today with Vince was able to jump on. How's it going?
Hello, miss me, everyone.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah. So we got that. Now we got Quint's missing again. We did this whole show for Quint. He just doesn't show up, but no, it's okay. He emailed me. He said
Oh yeah,
that
wasn't this his idea?
It was, and I was like, well, we'll do it, but he's had a really busy schedule, and so it was always 50-50 if he'd make it or not. So, but anyway, we'll do a good job,
School.
and maybe he can patch us up. Yeah, he's one of those guys
School's
in
important.
like high school. Yeah, it is. It is.
Mm-hmm.
May as well get your education while it's still free, or at least mandated too. But anyway, greetings everybody. I maybe we'll see the double digits. I don't know what's going on. Maybe I was throttled. YouTube's like, no, this guy's too crazy for me anymore. I don't know, but we'll see.
The cables are frozen. That's what's happening.
That's possible. It's very possible that half of my audience is frozen. And so that's a distinct thing. Of course, you just got done mowing your lawn, and it's nice out.
Mm-hmm.
At least nice relative to 20 degrees and blistering cold and snow. So I don't know.
Oh yeah, we're getting 20 degrees Celsius.
Yeah, I'm keep on getting some audio jiggery, or the audio's good. The video is jiggery, but that's okay. We'll run with it. K is 17. Not Gary. Not Gary says he's in middle school. So let's see. So what we're doing today is we want to talk about lessons for young people. Woohoo! We hit the double digits, man. We want to talk about lessons for young people as regards to technology and things like that. So. What's your first initial online take on that, Vince?
Well, I think the first thing would be there's different levels. It really depends on the age you're talking about, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if you're talking about children of preschool age, well, let me just start. I think one of the biggest things for us is being the father of some young kids is screen time. We're a big believer in limiting screen time because there's plenty of research that says that too much screen time actually hampers development.
Mm-hmm.
That's the first thing. So limiting that, and when you limit screen time, you automatically are limiting technology. I'm also not afraid of kids because they pick up things so quickly. Even if you limit them in their earlier years, they'll pick it up in an instant later on. That's my first take. And then you've got different levels of screen time for different ages. So for us, our recommendations are for under 2-year-olds, 0 screen time. And then for like preschool, 2 to 5's preschool age, an hour a day. And we stuck to that. In fact, we barely let our kids even that. Like most days it was like no screen. And then for school age kids, we're talking something like 2 hours a day of recreational time, let's say. I think if you start with that, I think you're onto a good footing.
So on that basis, then, do you think do you see it as a help or a hindrance where we're trying to say we need to limit our screen time, but here, go to school for 8 hours on the screen in our current world? What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, that's unfortunate. That's unfortunate. What other way could there have been? I mean, not every parent's geared up to homeschool their kid face to face. Some parents have still got to work if they've got a job still.
That's very true. So it's an interesting societal thing to ask. I remember, of course, when I was a college professor, I taught chemistry, and we were like, how do you do online education in chemistry? Well, you can do your lectures, but how do we do labs? I'm going to send you a bottle of hydrochloric acid, guys. Follow the instructions correctly.
Well, I'm now recalling that stuff that I think Pizza was showing us once, wasn't it?
Yeah.
The programs that they used and how they do experiments now in a computer program, and we were like, "What?"
Yeah, and they
how
didn't
can
make
you
sense.
see the reactions?
Yeah, and they don't even make sense. They're not even scientifically accurate. It's like they told some programming intern, "Hey, do something like this." Oh, okay, that's the thing. So, but yeah, I mean, homeschool where you can, but at the same time, man, it's not everybody is capable. I think it doesn't take as much as some people think it might, but you know, I've met parents that were better off sending their children to school for sure. But that's kind of one way or the other. Anything else on the
And plus
topic
the social interactions of school as well. I imagine a lot of kids are missing that at the moment.
Yeah, there was
Just
actually I
being
saw
with
some
friends.
research. I think it's Las Vegas. They forced their kids to go back to school because they're like, dude, our suicides among the young generation is like skyrocketing. And they're all like, we're lonely. And they're like, all right, kids go to school. You don't even really negatively impacted by COVID anyway. And so that's kind of what they did down there. And it'll be interesting to see what the final results are when that comes out. But yeah, so
Yeah, I mean that was one of the first things that happened with us. Even though everyone was sort of very wary, one of the first things that happened was the schools reopened last year
and did that have any
because
negative
of
consequences?
that. No, it didn't. I mean, we were very different in our situation, but there was a lot of debate, and a lot of people were very worried. The teachers, especially, because some of the teachers are elderly as well, right? And so the Teachers Federation, which is like their union, were very worried about the schools like reopening again. It's worked out.
Yeah, I'm in favor of if you're a high risk person. So if you're over that 65 mark, or if you have the comorbidities, okay, I will pay extra taxes to send that person home or give them in a non-contact job position. We have a whole lot of young teachers who are not going to be negatively impacted. We know the kids are not going to be negatively impacted. We just got to open the schools and just count for the fact that there's going to be a small amount of people who will be susceptible, and we need to be careful about those. But it doesn't make any sense locking everything and everybody down when the analysis, the data that we have suggests this is more of an elderly person's illness than anything else. So that's kind of
granted. I was kind of surprised how well homeschooling actually did work out for us when we were doing it. We only did it for a couple of months, I think it was. The schools they weren't set up at all for it at all, and so it was all a rush. But they ended up getting Google Classroom. And my phone's just gone off when I said Google. Anyway.
Yeah.
Has this result.
See, guys, this is why, guys, I don't recommend having these smart speakers around. I gotta say, hey Alexa, order unicorn meat confirm. I know this isn't the weekly news roundup, but
sorry if I've triggered everyone's devices as well.
That's fine. Well,
what was I talking about?
I don't know, as a side tangent, though, somebody actually yelled at me in the comments for my whole Alexa spiel, and they're like, I turn off the video and I say, all right, that's fine, because everyone loves the Alexa. Everyone loves ordering unicorn meat when I order it. I think you were talking about your school had just gotten Google services and stuff in.
Oh yeah, and knowing what we knew about Google and that they're essentially a marketing company, and wondering where this might lead in terms of as kids start to finish school, how sort of indoctrinated they are in the Google ecosystem. I was wary, but the system actually works reasonably well. There's enough interaction there with the teachers. They can set their homework. So it worked out okay for us, but it's not a replacement for real life in-person schooling. No way.
Yeah. In one of the circles that I go in, there's so it's a group that we do with some youth, and usually they do everything in person. And the last video call we have, because we decided this year we're going to meet once a month on Zoom, because we're all just scattered across the country. We just come together for one Christian camp in the summer. And the one kid's on there, he's like, I cannot stand this staying at home. He's like, I don't get fellowship on Zoom. And I agree with him. And a kid like that, man, he needs his friends around. And that's why I think it's better for our society to open things up more often than not. So just being careful of the vulnerable populations. It's easier to deal with those vulnerable populations than it is to lock everything and everybody down and live in fear. And that did impact education, I think. Anything else on young kids?
Yeah. not for. I suppose it's a good way to maybe move towards how we let kids interact on the internet as well. I mean, there definitely are, things like terms of service for things like YouTube where you can't be on unless you're 13 or over. But I think one of the key lessons that I would be teaching the kids, or my kids at least anyway, is that whatever you do online should really reflect what you would want to do, what you want to say and do in real life. Oh, sorry. What I got? Yeah,
I
anyway,
think so, that right.
your
Yeah,
real
whatever.
life persona should be like your online persona.
Yeah. I agree, and that's actually one of the notes I have. I actually pulled on. Well, I had four. You gave me a fifth one to talk about as well. So, and but anyway, the one of the things that I had mentioned. Let's go ahead and dive into that one. I'm going to go ahead and record some of these sections just in case we want to cut them up later. So we'll go ahead and start this one here. So this section will look at social media and tying into what you just said, where we need to be a little bit more cautious about what we post online and being a person of integrity, meaning whatever you do on social media should reflect who you really are. And my first point under this is just get off social media. It generally is not a really good thing for your mental health, honestly. I don't know if you have any thoughts or comments on that part.
At the very least, if you're on social media, know who you're interacting with. I've been on Facebook from the really early days of Facebook. I saw it as a way of being able to interact with a lot of my friends and family. And that's how it's remained for me. I don't join a lot of random communities. I don't just randomly friend people. And things like Twitter, I had a really old Twitter account that I hardly ever used. I mainly ever used it for adding companies that had really poor customer support, just calling them out and just trying to get a response. But I recently created a new Twitter profile that just has me interacting with a lot of the Linuxy people and tech people that I know, right? So you kind of know their background, you kind of know where they're coming from. And so you can interact with them when you can't do so in real life. And so it has its uses, but when you're interacting with complete strangers or getting news from from social media, and don't get me started on that because Australia's just done some wacky things.
I think I'm covering some in the news this week.
Yeah, it becomes a bit troublesome if that's where you're getting all your information from.
Yeah. So I guess that's a different tangent I was thinking of when I wrote my initial social media notes, but it's a very good one for young people, is making sure that you're interacting with people that you really know. And and sometimes you can get to know people in those as well, though. I'll say that because I've not met most of you guys in person, but we can jump onto the live chats or on the chats even on Discord and things. We'll go around there. We can get on calls like this that, and I'm talking to somebody in Australia. Go figure,
Yeah. But it stems from your videos, right? You get to know the person and then you can interact.
Yeah, you do. And there's ways and there's times and there's places, but ultimately you got to be careful about the communities. The next point, and keeping on the theme for lessons for young people, and when I wrote my notes, young people, I'm thinking like teenagers mostly, getting ready to move into the world. Whatever you do on social media is going to come back and bite you. And just an FYI, I know that you think you know everything there is to know about the world right now, and that your opinions are perfectly right now, but guaranteed your opinions on things are going to change throughout your life, and you don't want to say something on social media now that's hovering out in the archives for 14 years, that when you go become very successful director or something, somebody says, well, when he was 14 years old, he said something really stupid once, and you may not even agree with what you said anymore. So that's why it's important that you have to be very careful about everything.
I think what Tom's trying to say is, guys, us boomers have been there. We know what we're talking about. We were lucky enough to probably grow up in an era where this wasn't a thing, and so what we said was really only reproduced in a small circle. But you've got to be so much more careful these days.
Yeah, I mean, if you think back, and I think we've established we're right about the same age, right? And off-camera stuff. So neither one will say what that is, but but back in our day, there was nothing like, and we did some of the stupidest crap. Okay, I know I did some of the stupidest crap, and there's no record of that. There was no thing to record it. The only record of anything that happened in that time would be the journals I might keep, or maybe the journals friends of mine might have kept. Oh Lord, what do they have written down? They may. Well, half of them. No.
Yeah, I mean, if you got into the newspaper, you were really screwed.
Yeah. Well, hey, I've gotten in the newspaper on some good things. You know, you get in the newspaper,
Okay.
hey, I did a big poster for third grade. I was in the newspaper for that once. But that whole newspaper when I was arrested once in like seventh grade, that was just a bad time to be in the newspaper. You just don't want to be there, you know? So, although I doubt it. I doubt that made the paper because of the minor laws, but you know. True story.
The thing that I have with the teenagers in tech, if you want to talk about that age group, is, and it also goes along with the development idea I was having before. Teenagers are going to be at an age where the focus should be on developing relationships, right, with friends, with romantic relationships or whatever, and even some professional relationships too. And so if your time is taken up by a lot of tech, whether it be things like games, whether it be things like just interacting on social media, and not interacting with real life relationships, that's going to hamper your development as a person.
I agree. Yeah. And just social media is a weapon. It has tremendous benefits and it has tremendous consequences. You have to understand the power of that weapon to use it appropriately. That's my thought. Anything else on social media before we end up that section?
No, I think I've covered it. Yeah.
All right. Woohoo. There's our social media block. All right. Let's see. We've already touched on the Google ones. Let's do this one. I will not record this one. The only other thing I want to say about this is if your school gives you an account, Microsoft, Google, or some other weird random online account, then my recommendation, everybody, is make sure you just pull everything off of that. The day you graduate, download all your stuff, purge the account. That's my recommendation on that. I don't know if you have any other recommendation there.
I'd like to look into it more. And I didn't really do so when my daughter was using Google Classroom. But I wonder if any of the privacy policies are different when we're talking about educational products. That's just a thought that I had. In
theory, they're supposed to be. And my question is, are they really? Like, sure, they're not allowed to use the data. But if you look at the policies, it's like, many of these privacy policies are constructed around the straw man of the worst thing that could possibly happen is your data is used to market somebody. And so they're not allowed because of COPA to use the data in a student's account for that type of tracking. Technically, they're not allowed to use the data for very much, very, very restricted. But we're talking about Google. Can we trust them with that data? And that's the point we want to make, because they have done things that are untrustworthy. And we have to be cognizant of that, whether or not they are or not. Is it provable or not? I don't know. What do you think? Go ahead.
So they're a business, and that's what they do. And you have to go into it expecting that.
Correct.
I think the question is going to be like, can you trust them now? Can you trust them in the future with the same data? Right?
Yeah. Yeah, because the data's forever. I mean, I'm looking back and like the things I got it, like I have very, very little record of myself until the late 90s. I bought a computer and I still have things I typed on that computer since the 90s. Okay. The record will stay. And it's infinitely easier for Google to do that kind of stuff. And so that's why I don't mind if you have a Google account. I just want you to be cognizant of it. And what I have a biggest objection against the education accounts is the school district set those up for you, which means that the school district said, here's our roster of kids. Here's their first name, middle name, last name, their birth dates, their addresses, and all that type of stuff that if you personally set up your Google account, you might misdo the date on that address. You might, do something to not give them the data because Google doesn't need that much data, but the schools freely furnish it. And that's why I have a problem. That's why I think it should be illegal for the school to set this up. As the parent, you should have the full control, and you have control over your data and you can delete it any time. Is that really deleting it from Google's, 87 billion terabyte backup drive? It might delete it from the active stuff now, but is it being deleted from all their backups? And I just don't have any confirmation of that,
Mm-hmm.
And
so, completely agree.
Maybe I'm a little over paranoid, but that's okay. I'd rather be paranoid than be hurt in the future. So
it's not at being over paranoid to overprotect your kids.
Mm-hmm.
That's my view.
Absolutely. All right. Next one I have is on online forums. This will be a fun one. So I'll go ahead and start recording this one. All right, so the next section I want to talk about with you young people is internet forums, online forums. We all see these, and we go into school and we're taught, fill this out, put your name at the top of the paper. And as education moves online, you're literally taught and trained to fill out everything that pops up in front of you. Well, what if that's a phishing scam email? What if it's some pop-up that just, I don't know, okay, well, I'll give it whatever it wants. Or you visit a website and it's like, sign in here for extra tips or tricks or whatever else. Do you need to fill something in? This is a fascinating point because we need to ask ourselves a couple of interesting questions. I have some notes figured out, but Vince, give me your initial thoughts on this.
I don't have too many thoughts. I mean, I've been myself almost caught out by phishing scams. Some of them look so real, especially banking ones and some other ones. I think it goes to just general online safety education. This is not just, I think, for young people. It's across the board for anyone. For your elderly parents, down to young people. Even some people who are probably quite savvy probably have stories to tell of being caught out.
Yeah.
I don't know what the answer is. Like, how else would you get people to send in information that you might require?
Well, okay, so here's where I'm coming from. Maybe you're misunderstanding where I'm trying to go with this. So you visit some random website, you get a form pops up in front of you. Of course, this is what every marketing company does. And I wonder if they actually consult with the real world users, because I'm more inclined to close an entire website than to try and figure out how to close your form, which doesn't close easily. I've clicked the X 15 times. Would you close your stupid form? I'm not interested, but we're conditioned. What I'm saying is that this online education is conditioning us to fill out everything that pops up in front of our head. Number one, is it important to fill out this form? Number two, is it important to fill out everything on this form? So if it's something like, okay, I'm going to go in and I'm going to fill out a form. I'm going to go and buy something online. Sure, we need to give up some form of data in order to engage in that argument or that individual sale or whatever else we're doing. The question is every piece of information on that form required?
Right.
You got to check for the asterisk. If it doesn't have an asterisk, leave it blank. Okay. But it also asks, why is it important to fill out this form to begin with? And this is an important thing because you can access things. Like a good example, just off my head, Plex, right? At least as of the time I'm recording this, you can watch any movie and any TV program on Plex without an account. Why do you want an account again? Sure, you can purchase Plex if you want the commercial-free experience. I'm more inclined to say, hey, you want to give me a free option? I'll not turn on an ad blocker and give you some ad revenue. I'm all right with that. I'm okay with that. I'd rather preserve my privacy, watch an ad, and consume content without me having to pay out for it. Or pay them, give them the data that they want, and then I can watch stuff on their platform for free. But why would I create the free account Just that's the type of
Right.
thing
I
I'm
mean,
thinking of.
if I get what you're saying is it's giving some thought as to what you're doing and what you're giving out,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
Beforehand, and not doing it as a reflex because it's just something that you do because they asked. Um, yeah, if you understand maybe the benefits of signing up for Plex might be to, I don't know, sync your watch history or have recommendations. If you
Yeah,
understand that and
guess
you want
that's
that,
sure. Yeah. And
yeah.
also you would
But yeah,
create a
you've
Plex
got to understand
account.
it.
If you have your own Plex server, you can create a Plex account and connect your server and give your friends access to your media files over the internet. You know, those are the valid reasons for doing it. It was just a good example that if you're not doing that kind of stuff. But if you do have a Plex server, guys, make sure you update it. There was a big security vulnerability in Plex this last week. So
Uh-oh.
I won't talk about it anywhere else. Just look it up. Plex, if that applies to you, look up that Plex vulnerability and patch your servers, guys. But anyway. Yeah, so that's what I wanted to say about forms. Just good and simple, just cognizant thought is a thing. All right, there's that section. I'm gonna look at some comments. Let me jump over onto the Discord. Like this Discord's actually going crazier right now than the YouTube comments. That's kind of cool to see. And people are showing us their faces.
Jeffrey on YouTube. Jeffrey on YouTube has got a classic one about the test of. One of the tests we had in private school was follow the instructions and hand it in. And the last thing was put name, date, and time on paper and hand it in, and no one passed because that should have been the only instruction, and that should have been the only thing you did.
Yeah. So we're talking here about privacy and security, and people are over in Discord posting real pictures of themselves. So awesome. Well, it's good. It's good to put a face to a name, though. I mean, that's kind of cool. And Quantum Alpha, I always knew you were an anime character, so you know. But yeah, absolutely. And of course, they could just be random generated AIs too. We don't know. I mean, in a board like ours, we might be trolled with random generated AIs. Who knows? Haven't updated Plex Update Plus. Thank you for reminding me. Yeah, there was a security vulnerability in Plex for that. Otherwise, people are just talking about their ages and things, and is it Facebook going nuclear on Australia? That's showed up there.
Yeah, they went nuclear yesterday.
Yeah, and that's like they're preventing any sharing of news links. Is that what I heard right? I didn't read the articles yet.
Yes.
Nice.
Yeah, there's no news links, and I think even international Facebook users can't view Australian news links.
Wow.
From their Facebook.
That might actually clean up social media, to be honest with you. What will we do if our precious news echo chamber goes away? Next, I want to do passwords. That sound good?
Oh yeah, sounds good.
All right. So the next topic we're going to talk about with tech lessons for young people. Let's talk passwords. Of course, you always use 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 on every account, right?
No, I throw people off by going 7, 8, 9, 10.
Oh, wow. 7, 8, 9, 10. That's less secure, though. There's one fewer digit. You should do 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 6, 7, 8, 9.
Oh,
0,
no.
right?
Add an exclamation mark.
Oh, the 1, 0.
Your suite.
I gotcha.
You got to have a non-alpha character.
Okay, all right, sounds good. So there are always the lessons. Let me give you guys a couple lessons. Like these are not original ideas. Of course, you can look up the password lists. But for any Christians out there, don't use 2911 as your passwords. That's very common. 316 is very common in your passwords. These are very predictable. Just the popular Bible verses. And, things like that. Those are some of the passwords that I've seen in some places. And I'll have people hand me things. And it's like, you can tell they're a Christian. God is good. And it's like the zero is the O's are zeros. And, and it's like, that's predictable. Yeah. I mean, maybe have better passwords. I did have somebody, I did have a client. They're like, we got hacked. I don't know how. They gave me their password. It was literally ABC123. So the lesson for text for young people: do not reuse passwords and don't use simple passwords like that. I know it's very common, and I've worked with enough young people to know that oftentimes they do not have the best passwords. So, of course, let's start with number one: use a password manager. And what do you want to tell us about passwords before I dive in and give up my whole list of notes here?
Oh, well, I've actually recently myself started to transition to as many randomly generated passwords as I can now. I used to have passwords that were, real words and numbers and whatnot. But I know you're a fan of KeePass, and I've been using it for ages as well, even before we met. So I know it's probably what you're going to go into now.
Yeah, good password managers. There's going to be some snafu with LastPass soon, so I'll probably have a video about that because they're changing their model around a little bit. March 16th, if you're on LastPass, consider that. But there's two in the open source world for those looking for open source password managers. KeePass, and I use KeePass XC specifically. Absolutely love it. That is an offline one. It's a little bit more inconvenient because you have to share your KeePass file around and know how to sync and update it. I personally like the inconvenience of that. I have one master place, and really I don't have to have every password on every device every time. So I'll just pull, I keep one copy of it in my backup archives and on my server, and those are synced together. And as I need the new one, I'll just pull it down to whatever device needs it. So that's how I handle that. If you do need an online one, the best open source online one is going to be Bitwarden, which you can self-host, and I might look at doing that. The downside of that is you do have to register your self-hosted Bitwarden with Bitwarden, and I'm a little leery about that. But I am going to be testing out some email platforms as well. So hey, I'll just give them that email address because it's going to disappear soon. There are many other password managers out there as well. I generally am not a fan of putting them in the cloud because if those get hacked, it's over. It's like password Armageddon or something, and you don't want that to happen. So I prefer the offline ones. But do you prefer the offline or do you care for the online? So
yeah, I've always preferred the offline ones. I prefer having my password file on my own drive that I can control. That's not to say that there isn't a place for online ones too, because it's better to have a password manager and have it be a little bit more convenient and online rather than not having a password manager at all. So it's just a matter of choice.
Yeah, and there wouldn't be anything wrong too with having one of the free online password managers just for some things attached to some online accounts and just leave your major stuff off of that one. That's a split model as well. And that's I think that's one of the things that we're going to see with LastPass coming down. I'm not going to unveil everything they're doing. You can look it up, and I'll have a video on it soon. So
yeah, and Bitwarden seem to be a pretty good company. They're getting a lot of mind share, and they seem to be doing good things and sort of talk the talk and walk the walk.
Yeah, I would trust Bitwarden if I had to use an online one. And they have apps. I believe they have apps for all the devices, if I remember correctly. But your password managers will be able to do, as Vince said, do a random generated password. I actually don't like the random generateds because what I do is I have a very complicated salt. Actually, I have 3 of them. Or do I have 4 of them? I have 3 or 4 complicated salts. And then I use those salts, which I have memorized, and they're not even written down anywhere. They're written down like one place in case I die or something.
What's a salt?
So a salt is it's a prefix attached to anything you're doing on a password. So it's in my case, my most typical salt is I want to say it's like 10 or 12 characters. Yeah. Oh, I'm not gonna say it. It's 10 or 12 characters. It has lowercase, capital, numbers, special characters, and I have it memorized. And it's used literally multiple times a day, so I will never forget it. So I have that. Is it
like, because one of the suggestions I was given before was to use a passphrase, right? But rather than using the whole phrase, you use the initials of each word. You use the first letter of each word.
Yep. Something like that. Yeah. So that salt gets affixed to something else that's also related to the site. So I can look at any given site and know what my password is. And it's highly complicated and it's very long. But if I need to, I can type it manually in a nuclear option that every computer simultaneously blows up, including my backup archives at somebody else's house. Basically, a nuclear bomb falls on my town. I will still be able to remember my codes, but if a nuclear bomb falls on my town, I probably don't really care. But nevertheless, so I do have, I don't use the random generated, but the password managers will allow you to use the random generating. And frankly, they're good. And I've been shifting more and more things over to the password. I'm still in a bad habit of having, working with so many different client sites. I don't get them all into the password manager as much. So I might have a couple of text files floating around on the computer that aren't yet resolved, but we'll get there. So, but have a password manager and know how to use that password manager and use more complicated things, whether you're a long, complicated salt or, as Vince is doing, random generation, and both of those are going to be fine. As long as the password manager...
I think generally speaking, if you have your email very well secured, then you should be okay. Because most password recovery options on sites are going to use your email. So I have a very strong one for that one.
Yeah. Yeah, that's about what I had. I use offline password manager if possible, and I find that the inconvenience of that is definitely worth the security of it.
Yeah, I had a recent experience, actually, now that I think about it, of having to work with my 8-year-old daughter to figure out a password for her new computer, right? For school. Because she basically we got her a Mac and she had to make a new account, make a password, and they had some experience already because they had to set their own passwords when they were using Google Classroom. And remember, my kids, they don't get a lot of exposure to tech, and they don't have many accounts. So I had to explain to her, look, your password has to be this long. It's going to be something that you have to remember and always remember. And it has to be something random, it's not something not related to you. Like, you can't say your name, you can't say my name, you can't say your sister's name or whatever. And so that was an interesting experience that I had with trying to set a password with the kids.
Yeah, that's I know a friend of mine's has some of my passwords. He's like, how do you come up with these passwords? Like, it's habit for me at this point in time. So I use the salts, Usually my encryption is my really long salt is somewhere in any encryption password, and I have a shorter salt, which is usually used for computer logins, and then I have different salts I use for online type accounts and things like that. So, I'm actually migrating things to a new server, and I think I put 3 salts strung together with extra words in that for that one. So it's like, yeah, heck of that. Yeah, anything else on passwords there? All right, let's check in on some comments. So Leo's asking about Raspberry Pis. Doesn't have a computer. Will a Raspberry Pi work? No, I mean, for a daily driver, it's not going to be particularly good. You could use a Raspberry Pi as a daily driver for things like word processing, light tasks. You're not going to have a good experience getting on and watching YouTube on it. It's doable if you set the settings low enough, but it's not. Yeah. It's not the best. If you're doing anything intense, and then when you have gaming on it,
when you have more than a few tabs open on your browser, it's gonna chug a little bit, I think.
Yeah.
But if that's all you've got, it's better than nothing.
Yeah, playing old PC games, mostly Doom, CS, things like that, and watching YouTube. I think Doom should work fine on it. That'd be my guess. Web browsers, generally okay. YouTube, as long as if you cap out the Raspberry Pi 4s, which are like $55, those in theory can do 1080p, but they don't do it well, in my experience. If you drop your YouTube down to like 480p, they'll work on a Raspberry Pi. Actually, I did a whole Raspberry Pi on Manjaro not long ago.
I think the browsers are now getting better with hardware acceleration. I don't have a Pi, so I don't know how well hardware acceleration works on a Pi for video.
Yeah, it's a few months ago I did one on Manjaro and it worked. It just wasn't working well. Raspberry Pi 4 is fine for Discord or Pi-hole games. Games in YouTube, he says no, and I'd be inclined to agree with that. So, I mean, I think Opie is much better for a little tinkering device than other things. But yeah, it's they're good though. Am I getting pictures of? I'm getting pictures of Land Rovers with an alien in it. Not Gary. Why are you giving me pictures with my?
Oh, is that the Mars rover?
Oh, that's my friend Bob. My friend Bob is over there. Yeah, he went over and somebody photoshopped an alien into the Mars rover pictures. It's epic.
Oh, now I see it.
I love it. That's awesome.
Can someone do the unicorn?
Yeah. I didn't see the. Oh, is that this one? That's.
No, I'm asking someone to do so.
Oh. We need a unicorn on it. Yeah, somebody put a unicorn on that, or a can of unicorn meat. One of the two. Raspberry Pi for videos is not designed for ARM7. Yeah, it's like it'll work, but it's not really good. An old Dell PC was a PC with Vista originally, then upgraded to 7 and switched to Linux. Hey, there you go. Yeah, I mean, if you're on a budget, just check Craigslist and stuff like that. Oh, Quantum Alpha's putting Bernie on the moon. That's going to be epic. All right, and Quantum Alpha, when you're done putting Bernie on the moon, I need one with unicorn meat or a unicorn or maybe both, and then we'll have that. All right. Let's see. I had one topic left, and that is having a backup plan. So let's go ahead and start recording. All right, so our next topic on tech lessons for young people is have a backup plan. Of course, this is also for old people. We did a supporter stream a few weeks ago looking at backup solutions as well, mostly inspired by a friend of mine's like, yeah, my Mac is completely full on the hard drive and it crashed on an update and now it's a brick. So how do I get my data off of this? Pray. So, actually, it turns out that he had his old Mac was still around that they forgot about. He had his old Mac was still around, and it still had the password in its memory for the data bank that had done a recent backup, but he didn't know the password for it. So he was actually able to get in there, change the password, and get his data. And then he wiped the Mac, put the new Mac on, and then restored stuff. So it was a good news, but that rarely happens. And the moral of the story is have a backup plan. So Vince, what's your
with that Mac? I think one of the suggestions, unfortunately, is don't take it to Apple because I mean, from what I've seen, there's a fair chance they might get you to just buy a new machine. Mm-hmm. Backing up, it's one of the things that they're just. If you value your stuff, you've got to back up. It's just, there's no two ways about it. And you've got to follow some sort of routine. It's got to be scheduled or automated. I personally, I'm not a fan of automated backups. I see a lot of people talk about sync thing, and I think it's probably going to be great, but it's not for me. I like to see all my backups manually, being just files moving across manually. So I like that and control of, and that also helps me with versioning control. So I know if I've changed something here, I know I'll see it appear in my backups, and it allows me also to revert changes if I've made a mistake somewhere.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've used that. Like the reason I don't like automatically syncing folders is sometimes you goof something up and you sync the goof up into it. And I actually had that in one of the books I'm writing right now, where I went through and apparently like my writing computer, the way the keyboard mouse or the keypad, the mouse pad is, I occasionally touch it. And if I touch it and highlight something and start typing, I will have deleted a paragraph and not know it. And I'm going through editing this thing. I'm like, what in the world? This doesn't make any sense. Well, I had done that and I didn't know I did that. So because I keep like 10 redundant copies in my cloud, I was able to go back, find that paragraph, and boom. And so having the backup was absolutely critical for that. So don't wait until you have emergency for your backup. For me, I do manual backups as Vince does, and my websites all get backed up on like that's the first Monday of the month is usually what I do. And then as far as my files, I do those about every other month because I have a very large process system. But even if it's like the day before I back everything up, I'm not going to lose a lot because I actually have backups in 3 redundant places, both on-site and off-site locations. So that's my thoughts.
I use a program called Free File Sync, and I've been using it for a very long time. I'm very used to it. I actually, it's open source, so that's great. And I was actually using it long before I discovered Linux. I was using it on Windows for many years, and then using it on Mac. And it works across the 2 platforms. So if you want to keep a folder of files on a Mac and sync it with the Windows, it works. And likewise, it does so on Linux too. The only downside is it creates a little database file on each of the folders you want synced. But I think that's a small price to pay. It's only like a few hundred bytes or whatever it is. But what it allows is you to specify which folders. You can mount your drives from different machines and sync those folders across. And you get to see each little change, whether it's going to be moving from one direction to another direction. One great thing about it, which I find that a lot of backup programs and sync programs don't have, is it syncs deletions. So if you delete a file on one machine, it'll go ahead and delete it on another machine if you approve of it.
That's a good program. That's nice. External drives, redundant backups. I've been telling a friend of mine this for about a better part of a year now. He has yet to do it that I know of. Buy an external drive. They're like $50 and have a backup. And don't keep that drive perpetually backed up and plugged into your computer. I know some people do that, like, oh, I got my backup. Well, if a ransomware crypto virus comes in, it's going to encrypt your backup with your regular one. You keep that thing unplugged from your computer when you're not manually doing things over. That's all you do.
I suppose also don't trust your backups to just a single external drive as well. If you can, have a couple of them.
Yeah, I do. I actually have 3 backups. So I have a couple USBs and a couple external hard drives, and I have anything that's critical also stays on my NAS as well in an encrypted form there. If you are going to be using online services, then it's best to not use an online backup service because they will generally have access to your data. I think is it Spider Oak? I think is that the name of the one that was good, or unless they've died or something. I haven't heard anything about them in a while, but they actually encrypt everything beforehand. But still, I wouldn't trust syncing your data to Google Drive or to an Apple Drive because they have access to all that data. If you are going to use something, then find a type of backup solution that allows you to take your files, encrypt them locally, and then put that encrypted blob up on that server. So if somebody gets into there and gets it, they're just going to be finding themselves messing around with encrypted data blobs. And so that's the best way to do your offsite cloud-based backups, which I actually don't do any of cloud backups. I just rely on external hard drives in multiple different places. And knock on wood, haven't lost much yet. But
Commodore Fan 64, I think we're not just talking about Linux, we're talking about just in general for young people. And I think young people are probably also going to be using Windows and Mac machines, and as well as Chrome OS too.
Yep, absolutely. So, we didn't want to limit it just to Linux specifically, but it's just very important to have whatever system you're using. You just want to have a good backup strategy. You don't want to lose all your data. You don't want to lose your memories. You don't want to lose your schoolwork. You want to make sure that you are going to have those. And I remember, Vince, what's your worst backup? Like, what's your worst data loss that caused you to go,
I used to keep all my schoolwork as well. And I remember at one point in time, I had schoolwork dating back to 9th or 10th grade, like a long time. And somehow along the line, I lost it. I must have been doing a backup once and wasn't paying attention, and somehow it got deleted, whether I was just being uncoordinated and just hit the delete button by mistake and then synced that across. And apparently at the time that was my only backup, and so I lost that stuff. And once it's gone forever.
Yeah. I was so I'm working on my doctoral degree, and I have comps up in 1 week from comps. Yep, there went the zip disk. It failed.
Uh-oh.
I think I was able to recover a 3-week-old version that I forgot to delete off the lab computer. And I lost 3 weeks worth of work on my comps.
How many words were you into it at the time?
Oh, I don't remember. It was a lot, but I think I was like in edit mode for like the last month. And so I didn't lose a lot more than edits, as I recall. But that was when I bought my very first USB drive. Want to guess how big that USB drive was? It was huge. It was 168 megabytes. It's huge. I was so
I've still got some of those drives.
Yeah, that little thing carried more data than a zip disk. I mean, it was amazing. But
I'm pretty sure I've still got a 128 megabyte USB sitting here somewhere.
Nice.
You can't do anything with it.
Yeah,
I know. Anything with it at all.
I know. I think I might have one or two if I dig deep. I think I might have
and it'll
one
be
or two
USB 1.
Slightly about that size. I have a couple that are 1 gig. Yeah. So, I mean, the overall point, so we don't ramble on too much on this individual section here, is have yourself a good backup strategy, external drives, redundant backups. If you're putting stuff in the cloud, encrypt it in the cloud, and just make sure you're doing it, whatever systems you're using. Anything else on backups from your end?
No, I think you've covered it.
Well, those were the topics that I had in mind. Anything else that I didn't cover that we should talk about for tech lessons for youth?
I had a slightly different. It's sort of still the same thing, but it's a question about parental controls in software, and whether they're a good idea or not. With my kids being allowed more to be online, I'm thinking about it. But I understand the arguments on both sides. The argument for would be, yes, safety and peace of mind. The argument against would be, it's not an excuse for lazy parenting, because you've got to supervise your kids. You can't just let them loose online. But more so of allowing kids to fall over, so to speak, and get grazed and learn to pick themselves back up. So learning what some of the dangers are by being exposed to the dangers in a controlled manner, right?
Yeah, I mean, I'm here's the biggest challenge is the average age that kids fall into pornography addictions is 3rd grade now, which is shockingly low. So here's always been my approach. Of course, working with a lot of youth, being a tech guy, and mentoring boys. You can imagine I've encountered my fair share of this type of stuff. My approach has always been this. We're going to put this on your computer, not to spy on you and what you're doing, but for accountability. So you're either going to be a parent that puts it on your kid's computer and doesn't tell them so you can see what they're doing. Or you can say, we're putting this on your computer that if you fall in any bad spot, I'm going to know about it. And you be upfront with them. You talk to them and say, this is for what's called accountability. Because speaking as Christians at this point, my apologies if you're not a Christian, but speaking as Christians from this point, accountability is a very critical thing in the Christian walk and in the Christian life, because we all have struggles with temptations and things that we're all fighting and we're all battling, and we need our Christian brothers and sisters to help pick us up. And there is power in saying, I'm struggling with this. Can you hold me accountable? This is a thing that teaches your kids a good, sound Christian principle early on, the principle of accountability. So if you are going to put that type of software on your kids' computers, I'm a huge advocate of telling them about it. Now, does that give them the opportunity to find a way around it? I mean, you couldn't put tracking software on my computer that I wouldn't be able to find a way around. It's just the nature of what I do. But at the same time, the trust goes a whole lot further if you have the conversation, they know it's there, and then guess what they're not going to be using their computer for? And when their friend comes over and says, look at this, you go, no, you can't type that in, my dad will know. That's really where the accountability is. Rather than sitting there looking at the reports silently of what is he looking at, it's better to have those things where they know it's there, and it empowers them to make better choices on the front end. That's always been my take on it.
Yeah, I see what you mean. I wasn't even sort of really thinking going that far. Like even setting up something like a pie hole would be some form of control in a sense,
Yeah.
and you can set up those lists however you want. And to your point about accountability, that's not just a Christian thing. That's just being ethical and moral, right? Just being a good person. So that there's that. Yeah, I'm still kind of torn because the parent in me just worries the heck out of things, right? Because we've seen some of the crap that can go on online.
Yeah.
But at the same time, the kids they need to be educated. They need to know about this, and there's only so much amount of telling them, because there's going to come a point where everyone knows they don't listen to you 100% of the time, and so there's going to come a point in time they're going to stop listening and believing in what you're saying. And so in those times, you've got to have some sort of strong foundation of them making the right choices.
Yeah, and that's why I've always leaned towards telling them. I've never been an advocate of just putting it on and not telling them, because it helps them to make a better choice. If I could go back, and one of the stories from, when you're mentoring kids in the community, you're not always mentoring the best kids in the community, and we actually still have, this was only only a bit less than 10 years ago, which is shocking. We still had a video rental store. We could go in and rent a movie without putting a credit card in a little box. And they had all these movies. It was a weird thing, I know. Some of you guys may not even know what I'm talking about. But we'd go in there, and I'd have these kids over, and at the time they start hitting around late middle school, high school, I would say, hey, you can bring a friend over on Friday night, and we'll get some movies and get some pizza and play some games or whatever else. And so I'd have these kids come in, and we'd go into the store and rent movies. Now, I knew that these kids, at home, they were allowed to watch whatever. They could come home with X-rated garbage and watch it, and their parents wouldn't do anything. But when it come to my house, because they knew these are the rules and the guidance in my house, they would pick up a movie that they might want to see. They'd look at the rating on the back and put it back and say, we can't watch it at Tom's house. And they would go and find and settle on a movie that they could watch at my house. They were making better choices because I was clear to them about what the limits were. I love the idea of the pie hole, because they're not going to accidentally stumble upon something. And another person that I was counseling him out of getting out of that crazy world, he said he had to stay somewhere for a while that they did have filters on. He said, I knew what I wanted. I could get around those filters. You're not getting those filters around. And that's where having the accountability helped, because he'd be like, can you hold me accountable? And he hands me the devices and says, put stuff on here that's going to tell you if I'm looking at bad stuff. And he never looked at it again. And that's the important point, where you have to walk that line between it, because one of the downsides of letting them fall on their own at home is it's like letting them fall in the world, because the internet is an extension of the world. It's a dangerous place, and you can fall really deep really fast and not be able to get out. So that's kind of that.
Yeah. I really like the idea of actually sitting them down and explaining to them why this stuff is there in the first place. Why have we put these in place? I think that's very sensible. And it teaches a very important lesson.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. Art of music. If I find my kids on TikTok and Snapchat, they are having their devices thrown on the driveway and run over in an instant.
Yeah, that's a no. That's like me and Facebook. One of the Christian publisher group that I'm part of, that they asked me to write a blog post because I know a little bit about podcasting here and there, so they asked me to write a blog post about podcasting, and so they're like, "Are you on our Facebook
I'm
group?"
afraid to get on TikTok.
Yeah, is that not frightening? Yeah.
I mean, I've seen some stuff there. I've seen some good stuff. Like I've seen like cooking hacks and a few other things on there. But I don't know. Maybe I've got the wrong impression. But the majority of what I think is on there is not good.
I think I saw one TikTok video, and it was a guy in a shower dressed as a cow pouring milk over his body. I was like, what in the world is this nonsense?
There was another one I saw of a guy, I think, making a snowman in Australia, which is insane.
Yeah.
If you know anything about the weather.
It's like, do you never get snow at all?
Yeah, we have snow in one place, and it's called the Snowy Mountains. That's how much snow we get.
Okay, so is he building a snowman at the Snowy Mountains?
No, he's just building it in the backyard of his house. He's just got shaved ice from his fridge, building a snowman.
That's interesting. Yeah, fun. We are over the hour mark, so I think we're gonna wrap this guy up here. Of course, I will.
That went by fast.
Yeah, it did. That was a really good show. Though I'll cut these up, and I'll release some of these videos sprinkled over the next couple of weeks here. Yeah, I think it's a good tips, and we'll get a good little 4 or 5 part mini series out of this. However many clips, I think I recorded 4 clips. So I am streaming on my Christian channel tonight in 1 hour's time. I'll go ahead and drop the link for that in the comments here in a moment after I'm done talking. And then we're not going through our Hebrews study tonight. I'm going to look at the Christians are starting to become under assault in America. We're going to be looking at that general theme tonight. It's kind of an experimental. I want to do something different. I want to see how this goes, and if this goes well, I'm going to do more shows like this. So it's kind of where I'm going. What's your final thoughts, sir, Vince?
Oh, hang on. I was just typing a message.
Okay.
I think the answer to young people with tech is get off tech when you can. That's my message. You don't need to spend your entire life in tech. And when you do, keep your wits about you. Ask for help when you need to. There are plenty of people out there who are willing to help, who are trustworthy. But yeah, don't just be careful of what you do and say. It's important.
Yeah, absolutely. I did see this very briefly. I didn't get a chance to look at it. There apparently is a new one of these social media challenges going around. What's that one about? Have you seen anything about it?
No, it's not another Tide Pod one, is it?
No. I mean, it's one of the quote unquote good ones, like the ALD one, because like Paterno's either daughter or wife or whatever, a big prominent citizen in State College here, just did it, and it made the cover on the local newspaper. Like, okay, whatever. I don't know if anybody knows whatever the latest social media craze is, because I'm just not on social media. I don't know what this nonsense is.
No, I mean it's a point that you when you're a boomer when you can't keep up with this crap.
Mm-hmm. We're getting there, man. We're getting there. We're getting there. But at least I know how to make a nanoscale Raspberry Pi NAS drive, and I'll have a video on that in a couple weeks, guys. I got most of the video footage cut. I'm waiting on a case. That's why you guys haven't seen it yet. I'm waiting on a case to bling this bad boy out. So, but I have most of the rest of it done and ready to go. I just need to do some editing on it. So, well, that's coming down the pipeline. We have a couple of more Pi videos coming too. But anyway, I think we'll go ahead and wrap this one up here. Thanks for coming along, Vince.
My pleasure. I've loved it, and I've missed you guys. I've been away for too long.
Yeah. But you got to go do that day job. I mean, nothing interferes.
Yeah, and I will be in an hour or so as well.
All right. Well, we'll let you get back to work then. All right. Well, thanks for coming on.